Hey everybody, welcome back. This tutorial is going to cover the basic user interface of Photoshop CS6. We're going to talk about the 5 key areas that you could expect to see in Photoshop, which are the toolbar, the menu bar along the top, the tool options bar below the menu bar, the palettes, and your preview window. So starting off with the toolbar here, there's different ways of viewing this, but by default you'll get one row of tools. And the toolbar is divided up into several sections, and you can kind of see that if you look closely. There's a little line here, and a line here, and a line here. And the developers at Photoshop did this because those tools all have something in common. The first thing that I want to talk about with the toolbar is that there's a lot more tools than you'll see in Photoshop the first time you open it. So if you click and hold on any of these tools that have this little right corner arrow in the lower right corner, if you click and hold your mouse button, you're going to see a flyout menu pop up showing you that there are more tools embedded there. And so in our first group here, I'd like to call these the selection tools. These are the different tools for selecting things, as you might imagine. Photoshop's a pixel program, so Photoshop just sees the pixels. It doesn't know the boundaries of the image that we're actually seeing with our eyes, so it doesn't know where graphics or pictures or subject matter begins and ends. It's your job in Photoshop to tell it that. So if I wanted to select this first square, for example, and do something to it, I have to isolate those pixels. So for example, you could grab the marquee tool and draw around that square, and those pixels are selected, and the pixels outside that box will be ignored. And then you can hit Control or Command D to close that. The next group are editing tools for fixing up things like blemishes, using things like paintbrushes, etc. They're also called the brush tools because they use the brush format that is familiar with Photoshop to people who use Photoshop. So for example, if I click the paintbrush tool, I am presented with different brush options in the tool options palette up here, namely the different brush size, opacity, and flow. So I could either be painting pixels, but if I'm cloning pixels, I'll also have opacity and flow and brush tip size. So even though I am copying pixels with the clone stamp and painting pixels with the brush tool, or maybe fixing pixels with the healing brush, it's all considered a brush. The next section is going to be the vector tools section. This is like having your own little version of Adobe Illustrator embedded within Photoshop. So if you want to draw vector shapes, such as simple boxes and custom shapes, or use the pen tool for doing custom shapes and adding text, you can select those down in this section. This lower section here is different ways to interact with your preview window. One way is if you're zoomed in really far to your image and you want to scoot around your image, you can use the hand tool to do that. And then the zoom tool will zoom you in and out of your image, which you can hold the plus and minus. If you hold the option key, or if you let go of it, it'll zoom in and out. And then the last part is the different tool palette, the color palette or color picker options, namely the foreground color, which is this first box, and the background color, which is this background box. So you can pre-select 2 colors to do that. You have a default black and white. So for example, if I have red and white chosen and I want to return back to black and white, I can just simply hit this button here and it will return me to black and white. I could swap the foreground and background colors by hitting this arrow, and it will swap those two. The next section that you're going to be concerned with, section number 2, is the menu bar. And these are different options that you have that specifically are stated at the top here. So anything and everything to do with files, anything and everything to do with editing, image, and so forth. Layers are listed under here. I'll cover this in greater detail in subsequent tutorials where it's relevant to that particular tutorial, but I'm not going to get too far into that. But that's your menu bar here on the top. Below that is your tool options bar. It's called that because whatever tool you select, the tool options bar will change and allow you to select different options for that specific tool. So depending on the tool that you currently have selections, that options bar will change. So make sure you pay attention to what tool you have selected and the options you have available in the tool options bar. The fourth area in Photoshop is your palettes bar, which is over here on the right of your screen. By default, you'll have the layers palette, which is the most important palette in all of Photoshop, and embedded with that are other palettes like the channels and paths palette. You have options for adjusting things like your paragraph if you have text, and character palette if you're also adjusting text like fonts, etc. You have an adjustment palette, a style palette, and a color palette. So to get to your different palettes, you can go under the window menu and choose different palettes on an alphabetized basis. You can see there's several that are not selected, but the ones that do have check marks are the ones that are showing up here for your use. So for example, if I want to bring up the brush palette, I just need to check that, and the brush palette will be added to that palette bar. And again, like the tool options bar and the menu bar, I'm not going to go too far into detail. There'll be more detailed tutorials in other videos that I'll show. I'm just kind of taking you through the interface to kind of show you where things are located. You can add things to this bar, and to save and maximize space, you can just click the buttons on that and close and open palettes. Palettes can also be dragged and dropped outside of and pulled off of and added to different bars if you want to do that. And if you ever get to a point where there's stuff missing and you can't see palettes that you've been using in the past, you need only go up to the Essentials button at the top here and set that to Reset Essentials, and it will return everything as it was when you first installed Photoshop. So that's kind of helpful. The fifth area in Photoshop that you're going to be concerned with is your preview window. That's where all your work is going to happen. That's where you'll see things like the file name. If you have rulers turned on, you'll see a ruler at the top and left side for vertical and horizontal measurement. If you need it, you can also see the document size in its layered form and in its flattened form. Right now the document's saying that it's the same size, and that's because I only have one layer. But as I add layers to this, the left number will increase in size because it has to display artwork on each of those layers. But it'll also show you what the file size will be reduced to if you flatten the image down to, say, something like a JPEG. So that's pretty much how the Adobe interface is presented to you. It's same for the Mac. Very little changes for the Mac, with the exception of your minimize and your close windows might be a little bit different, but everything else in CS6 will look similar in Mac as it does in Windows.